Like you have a civil designer, okay, fine. You have your MEP person, fine. You have your architect, but we're another layer of that team. And just so happens that maybe the work doesn't necessarily, you don't see it as much, but it does cover all those different disciplines within the work, all to make a high-performance building. You know, we've always said that a building can't be sustainable unless it's accessible.
Hi, this is Kelly Westby, and you just heard the voice of Jeff Heitert. He's from the accessibility team here at Stephen Winter Associates. For the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, which is on July 26th, we wanted to dedicate this episode to our accessibility team at SWA. We dig into a couple of our folks' career journeys and what it's like to be an accessibility consultant for new construction and existing buildings. It becomes so clear that our accessibility consultants do so much more than simply checking the box on requirements. They share their passion for removing physical barriers to access the built environment that have historically marginalized people with disabilities. Our accessibility consultants provide plan reviews, field inspections, technical assistance, litigation consulting, as well as inclusive design consulting to help people go beyond compliance. Beyond the ADA, our accessibility consultants work with state and local human rights laws or building codes, Architectural Barriers Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the Fair Housing Amendments Act. This episode is sponsored by the Passive House Accelerator. I'd like to encourage everyone to check out the Passive House Accelerator. It's an online community and media company dedicated to accelerating the transition to clean, resilient, zero-carbon buildings. Among many things, the Passive House Accelerator hosts live online educational gatherings, puts on YouTube videos, publishes a magazine twice a year, and hosts the Reimagine Building Conference Series. They even have their own podcast. To learn more, please visit passivehouseaccelerator.com. Before we jump right into it, I wanted to call out a few things you might hear. When our guests mention Peter, they're talking about Peter Stratton, the managing director of our accessibility services here at Stephen Winter Associates, and his book, A Basic Guide to Fair Housing Accessibility, Everything Architects and Builders Need to Know About the Fair Housing Act Accessibility Guidelines. Lastly, you might hear us talk to Ian. He's our video producer at SWA and a producer for the Buildings and Beyond podcast. I really enjoyed hearing all of our guest stories today, and I think it's a great opportunity for folks curious about a career at the intersection of architecture and social justice. Okay, now let's dive right in. So hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we have an excellent lineup for our guests here. We have a few different folks from our accessibility team, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, give your name and your position, and maybe how long you've been at SWA.
Awesome. Hello, Kelly, and excited to be here. I am Jennifer Lowe, Senior Accessibility Consultant here at SWA. I work with the commercial team, and I specialize and manage the healthcare portfolio. I've been at SWA for almost a decade. It really does fly.
Hi, I'm Jeff Heitert. I am an accessibility consulting director here at SWA. I've been here for a little over 18 years now, predominantly dealing with residential work, but I do get involved with every project that we deal with here and the management of the team as well.
And I am Carlos Sevillano. I am a senior accessibility consultant here at SWA. I've been here, 9 years.
Woo!
And I mainly work with the residential aspect of things, and I also dabble. I dabble a little bit. I go to jails and other things. So I definitely dabble.
For work.
For work.
Amazing. And it sounds like all of you have a little bit of a different focus on the team, and so I think we're going to get a great perspective about the different careers we can have in accessibility. But you know, for the audience where all of you have been working in this for a long time and so know a lot about it, but just giving our audience a little bit of a perspective, accessibility consulting, what does that even mean?
I think that's really a good question. There's not anything you can necessarily go to colleges or universities for to say, or even trade schools to say, I'm going to become an accessibility consultant. So I know from at least knowing Jen and Carlos and the others on our team, we certainly have a varied background and where we came from and how we got involved to it. For me, I have a background in architecture, some engineering. I have a degree in applied mathematics. Did try to go back to do some architecture work, and I realized I didn't like it. So this opportunity popped up, and I saw some of the requisites of it, and I'm like, wow, I could do that. And over time, I really grew to like it. I like the aspect of basically using both sides, left brain, right brain, having to know something technical, but yet still being creative as well. And the fact that we get to make an immediate impact on others' lives is really fulfilling. So I think all those together, but again, it's not a linear path.
Fantastic. And Jen, how would you describe accessibility consulting?
So very simply, I think accessibility consulting is making sure that your facility complies with civil rights. And we know if your facility complies with civil rights laws by way of technical standards. That is through standards such as the 2010 ADA standards and building codes, the A117 standards. And, accessibility consulting begins as early as schematic design in the programming phase, and it can take you through construction to occupancy. Yeah.
That's fantastic. It's very clear to me that all of you are really passionate about the work you do, and clearly it's keeping you engaged for many, many years, each of you. So I'm curious if each of you can share a little bit about your career story. How did you become an accessibility consultant?
You want to start with me? It's a journey. All right, put in your seatbelt. Okay, so my background is actually in environmental studies and sociology. And throughout my life, it's always been clear to me that quality education and social justice are ways to break barriers. And as my first mentor was my high school principal, I wanted to be in education. So I actually graduated and taught through Teach for America, second and third grade special ed. And that was a very short stint, and it really showed me that you need proper training to become a teacher, particularly with special ed students. And then Hurricane Sandy hit, and New York City had a blackout for almost a week. And I was living in the Lower East Side then, and I learned of a role where the nonprofit close by in my neighborhood got funding through FEMA to provide crisis counseling for the members of the community. And through that program, we learned that a lot of the people in the community struggled to get their medicine, resources, and people were living in the housing projects, having trouble walking down 17 flights of stairs. And it was, quite a scary time. So I think what I learned from that role too was that the skills I learned as a crisis counselor actually translates very well, because sometimes on site we have to deal with crises, and you're managing how to fix something on site, and you're managing people's emotions. So that was a government grant that ended, and then I was like, I need to make use of my degree. And in New York City, was there a lot of besides people? There's a lot of buildings. So I volunteered with Green Home NYC and USGBC, got my LEED certification, and through Green Home NYC, I met another one of my mentors. You guys may know him, Andy Padian. And he continues to foster folks who want to break into the green building industry. And he linked me up to SWA. And it just so happened that SWA had won a large residential contract to survey luxury buildings throughout the city. So I actually started on site, and I learned a lot on my feet. And I started as a contractor, and this job was a lot more technical than I thought I was capable. But Peter and SWA, Peter, our managing director, and Mark Jackson, my supervisor, saw that I was capable and paid for night classes so that I could get trained up to learn how to navigate plans. And so, people may not see that, but you got to put in the work. And I struggled and I learned, and I went from being a contractor to a full-time employee, and here I am.
That's fantastic. What a journey. Carlos, do you want to go next?
Sure. I would love to. Thanks for asking, Kelly. So mine is a little different. I actually started, I've been in the construction industry since I was 15. I was a licensed carpenter for a while. My degree is in education, actually. So I was a teacher for 10 years. I taught special ed for 10 years. I have a master's degree in special education. I never even considered this. I mean, I was in construction, but never considered kind of going beyond it. And I was teaching at a high school. It's local to where our Connecticut office is. And I had a good amount of kids in wheelchairs. And this is how I got into this. I will never forget this as long as I live. I had to toilet the children because I was the only male there. And I brought one of them, Calvin. I can mention Calvin's name. To the bathroom, and I said, "Are you good? You using the grab bars? You're all right?" He says, "Yeah, I'm good." So I said, "All right, wait outside. Let me know when you're done." So I'm sitting there. I'm just kind of waiting, and all of a sudden I hear, "Ice, ice, ice!" So I ran inside, and poor Calvin fell in the toilet. Was butt in the toilet, and I said, "I need to do something about this." Like it was funny. I mean, we were both laughing our butts off. It was, but for some reason it triggered something in my brain. Like, the design of this restroom does not work for this kid. And beyond that, I went back to architecture school after that. I got an architecture degree, and I was looking kind of for jobs. I wasn't thinking, I was thinking of it more in terms of design. Like, all right, I'm going to work for an architecture firm. I'm going to be able to design things that are, good for, accessible for kids. I mean, that was my mentality in the whole kind of scheme of things. And then I ended up getting a job offer, and I was going to take it. And I had this book from when I did and they all make fun. These guys make fun of me because they think it's not real. But I had this book on my nightstand because I did part of my thesis was an accessible design thing, and I bought this book, and I looked, and I'm like, oh, Norwalk, Connecticut. I'm like, it's so much better than working in the city. I'm like, I wonder what's up with that. So I went online, I looked, and they were looking for, I looked at Stephen Winter Associates. It was a book that Peter wrote, and I'm like, oh, let me go online. I got my, got a job offer, got the book on my nightstand. I was not really feeling coming down to the city every day. I saw Norwalk, Connecticut. I went on my computer, saw Stephen Winter Associates. I sent an email, and within an hour, I think it was Peter called me within an hour, and I had interviewed probably the day after. It was when Roisin started, actually. She was my first interview. And
Roisin is our director of HR.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, Roisin, I'm going to name, I name dropped about
Everyone
her.
Roisin.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, and speaking with Peter, I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. It's melding everything I've done. I mean, again, the advocacy that I've always been part of, the education side of things, the construction side of things, the architecture side of things, and it's been a really, really happy marriage ever since. I mean, I've been just extremely happy to be here. Obviously, I work with amazing people, but the work that we do is pretty incredible. I mean, at the end of the day. So that's where my journey, I guess, begins and ends right now.
That's fantastic. And what a journey. And also just, it seems so clear that both of you have in your mind the people that you're trying to serve every single day. Jeff, do you want to take us through your career journey?
Sure. Working in an architecture firm, then when I got back up to Connecticut, when I was in college, finishing up during my spare time in school and during the summer times, I was able to do surveying work. That taught me a lot about site work, about reading plans a little differently, deed research, and how a lot of residential buildings were constructed. I'd only really worked in the commercial aspect of architecture, so that certainly helped. And then getting an applied mathematics degree was really helpful in the fact of thinking about logic and how things kind of tie together. You don't necessarily know, as far as, it's not math, like 1 + 1 is 2. It's really thinking about how simple things can be used in order to make something greater. How do computers work? How does quantum physics work? How does everything have an order? And after my other jobs, when I was working in Providence, I realized that I really need to do something different. So I was able to find this job in Connecticut, and I looked at the resume or the position and said, wow, this might be interesting. Got the interview, was offered the position, and when I started, there was only 4 of us on the team, excluding Peter, and now I think we're up to 23. So how we've grown is really great, but the help in that we're able to provide and the service that we're able to provide, I think that has always remained pretty consistent with the stuff that we do here, and that helps.
Yeah. And I would say it sounds like each of you have come at this journey from a very different place. I mean, the 2 teaching backgrounds I thought was very interesting. What comes up for me is maybe this aspect of having to communicate to people in the field. And that I wonder if that really plays into what you've learned. And I feel like applied mathematics is also relevant. So I'm curious, what parts of your background have actually been really helpful for you?
Well, I think what you touched on there is that everyone in our company, we provide information to others. That is our job. And if we're not doing that efficiently, effectively, and to the utmost level of
expertise,
then we're not doing our job. And communication is key for that. Written, verbal, even just rapport among people, trust, all those things together. I think the people who do really well in the work that we do, probably throughout the company, are excellent communicators. So I'm not surprised that's sort of a
common theme
with everybody. Yeah.
Even the types. I mean, you think about it's kind of the types of communication too. I mean, we're dealing with all sorts of people at the end of the day. It's like, you're dealing with the electrician all the way up to the owner of the building. I mean, or the, even the owner of the company who owns the building. I mean, we're dealing with everybody at that end. So you also need to be able to know how to speak to different types of people at the same time. It's definitely a balancing act.
Motivation.
A lot of the times that we're successful in a project is when we're excellent communicators and able to figure out how we get the best out of other people. So there is a lot of things I think that really help, not only doing this work, but like it helps in your personal life too. Like thinking about like, how do I want to be able to be really good at something? I guess a lot of people have to deal with that in their own professional lives. But with us, I think that we're so heavily involved in trying to improve other people's lives through the aspects of design and construction. It sort of does bleed into everything else. And like, how can I really get my point across in the most effective way?
Yeah, it's a way that you serve others, like being able to, or thinking through how you want to communicate something and communicating it really effectively is kind of a way that you serve others.
And get paid for it.
It is a business. Kelly, to your question about communication, I think something that I learned early on when getting on site, sometimes we have to deliver bad news. And I think that there's a way of delivering news that is productive, and it's not about designating blame, but it is trying to find where that miscommunication happened and figuring out how not to repeat that in future projects. And something, sometimes it may just be the fact that the general accessibility sheet has a certain dimension or information on it that conflicts with the detail, and the contractor has no idea which one he's supposed to follow. And of course, a good contractor would submit an RFI and get the correct information confirmed by both the architect and us as the accessibility consultants. But there's so many things they have to think about to get the building built. Sometimes that gets lost in the weeds. And so,
And there might be pressure in terms of time to get something delivered in a certain schedule. And so there's a lot of factors at play.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we try to mitigate that and pick it up during plan reviews, but we're always trying to improve our processes as well, and how to better communicate it so that it's clear what needs to get done.
And I think that ties back to what Jeff was saying earlier about solutions and what you were talking about, Carlos, with being creative. There's, you try to pick it up in design, but there's ultimately always going to be issues you run into in the field. How are you oftentimes finding yourselves working with construction teams when you're in the field and maybe realize there was a mishap?
That's a good question, actually. I think the first thing, and this is where I think the expertise on the people on our own team is very helpful. Having the experience that we do throughout time, throughout different, knowing other people, and even just the complicated some of the things we have to deal with. Like Jen said, we're not usually the purveyors of good news. So oftentimes we'll have to say, well, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is this is not compliant. The good news is I've got an idea how we can fix it. And that does sort of take a lot of, it numbs the pain, if you will. And I think when we can do that and we have the wealth of knowledge, we can ask each other on the team, have you seen a situation like this before? We've been doing a lot more kind of team knowledge-based discussions on Mondays. So if there's interesting things that people see, or questions they're not sure about, because consistency, obviously, we want to make sure that we're consistent from everybody on the team. That certainly helps, and with kind of lessening the pain from when dealing with clients in the field, it's certainly a way that I think makes us very effective at what we do.
Yeah, and I think we look at the code for what's required, but the code doesn't really talk about this creativity. So that aspect of working with the team, seeing what have you seen, what are your lessons learned from the field, and being able to share that with so many people across the team, I bet you get a lot of great ideas that way.
Just to expand a little bit on that, we have a colleague who has gotten really good at fitting all the things that hotel owners want to fit into tiny hotel rooms and make sure that they're accessible. So that's kind of been like a new line of business for us, because it's challenging if you're limited in space and trying to fit the luxury amenities you have, and we want to make sure the accessible rooms provide the same amenities as the other ones provided throughout the hotel.
That's a fun exercise, though. If you think about it. I mean, we've done other projects, hotel rooms. We did the RVs, the same thing.
Yes, you did that.
Yeah, so I mean, we've done projects where we've had to be incredibly creative in terms of the use of space, and it's not even creative. It's fun. I mean, it really is. At the end of the day, it's a fun exercise, and if you get it to work, it's kind of like oh, good for me.
It's like
you made it work.
Yay.
Especially with real estate as expensive as it is, every square inch counts.
Right.
There is a financial ramification for say you have to make this room bigger. That's money, but can we maybe finagle something in a smaller space in order to conserve? How can you don't need this here. Can we save some money here or there? Those discussions aren't necessarily in the realm of accessibility, but having expertise and knowledge about a lot of other things, because we do deal with everything. We deal with the architecture, we deal with the site work, we deal with the MEPs, landscape, fire alarms, low voltage, and we have a lot of that knowledge base. So.
And I bet your architecture degree and background also plays into your ability to kind of communicate effectively with the architecture.
Not the degree, but the background helps.
Same.
Yes. Same. You can ask my mom about this. But yeah, I think all those things together are really trying to give us more value to that. And it's not just necessarily looking in a book and saying, this is right, this is wrong. There are very, very many ways for us to be effective in the work that we do. beyond a simple what you can find in a book.
It's where, I was thinking about this the other day. It's like the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Like, like when you start, you gain this knowledge, you have it all, it's all in the books. But as far as you keep on going, and it's, it does become wisdom at the end of the day. It does help you, again, find these solutions to these issues. It's definitely grows. It's interesting how it does, but it definitely. It's all in there, It's weird.
It just clicks.
It's weird.
And we've all been around here for enough time to think about the things where, like, I remember that project from 6 years ago, or I'll have a discussion with somebody. Remember the time we did that 7 years ago? Right. That's and we'll know exactly where it was, and we can pull that knowledge base and utilizing it in a different way, or remembering, say, how something worked out really well. Then that may be almost a standardized thing to say. Everyone else is kind of freaking out about a potential problem. Like, I've got a good solution for this, and you can bring it to the table. And I like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it sounds like there's some things that you can pull from 7 years ago, 8 years ago, but I imagine some things are also changing over time. How are things changing in the field of accessibility consulting, and how has that impacted your role?
Well, I would say it's kind of evident even in the early stages of us receiving RFPs, because we used to be an afterthought. It's after the lawsuit, or the DOJ mandated these remediations to be done in 5 years, and now we're seeing RFPs request accessibility and inclusive design from the get-go, and that's a wonderful thing, because I liken our work to like getting news about your health. You want to get it ASAP, and you want to figure out a roadmap ASAP. And so that's really awesome. Like, we're seeing it from the very beginning.
Yeah, I guess to piggyback off of what you're saying, it sometimes feels like we're the main kind of character in these, in these kind of construction projects. We come in. There's a lot of importance put into what we're doing, and people have noticed that yes, it's important to make buildings accessible. But I guess thinking about it, obviously we talked about the whole risk thing. Yeah, people are looking at it in terms of risk, and they're looking at it more in terms of risk now. What I've seen change also is, buildings are being bought and sold. So people want to make sure that, when a building is being purchased, or, that everything is okay as far as accessibility. And let me tell you, I go in and I do some of these inspections, and that drive down prices millions of dollars because things aren't accessible. So, there's a lot of money involved at the same time. So that I think is how things have changed. But again, I think people are more, I guess, apt to think of accessibility, again, not as an afterthought, like you said. It's right in the center of things, and
And that's
a good
interesting.
thing. Yeah.
You had talked about at the beginning in an RFP stage, assumedly for maybe a new construction project. And what you referred to sounded a little more like due diligence when the customer is buying a property. So is that a significant portion of the work that you're doing?
No, but it's become somewhat significant. You're not dealing with the construction people, you're dealing with the money people at that end. And I think, they're looking at it, obviously they're looking at the building holistically. They're looking at it in terms of, all right, if I'm going to purchase this building, I want to make sure that it's, that it's okay. And yeah, it's definitely become something that we're doing a little bit more often now because of that.
You're definitely seeing it from the commercial side in terms of banks making that a requirement before lending the money. So
even HUD will do that now
Yep.
too. To get the loans, they say we need to get a sign off and an accessibility consultant. And to me, I think a lot of what I try to kind of relay to our potential clients or our current clients is that the work that we do really shouldn't be considered any different than another discipline of the work that we have. Like, you have a civil designer, okay, fine. You have your MEP person, fine. You have your architect, but we're another layer of that team. And it just so happens that maybe the work doesn't necessarily, you don't see it as much, but it does cover all those different disciplines within the work, all to make a high-performance building. We've always said that a building can't be sustainable unless it's accessible, and that'll help it be prolonged for the long term. And that's certainly one of the
Yeah, because if you
one of the good
open
things
that up and
about our
then
work. Sorry.
no, if you open up the building and then it's not accessible and someone comes in and does a due diligence walkthrough and you have to recreate the entire building.
That's
All that
what
materials.
happens. It happens a lot. That we end up having to sign a lot of compliance letters to verify, to say the Department of Justice, or for lawsuits to settle these things. And as far as what's been a little bit different over the years, I think our society's gotten a lot more litigious. So everyone's a little bit more concerned of well, things aren't as easily hideable these days, or the importance of getting things right the first time, I think, is certainly helpful to our business. But again, that means that we have to be at the top of our game to make sure that what we're doing is right. But the good thing is, at least as far as the codes and standards are concerned, they're starting to get a little bit more aligned with one another. I think there's a certain understanding that when you have things that are so out of whack, it's hard to decipher what I'd say the right way to do things, or at least the correct way to do things. But it's getting better with that. And we can certainly educate as much as we can, as far as giving trainings to our potential clients, giving trainings to contractors even, and keeping up on it. The knowledge really isn't going to stop, because things are going to progress. Things like electric vehicle charging stations. They weren't something 10 years ago. Now they're all over the place. So we have to be mindful of what do we need to do here? How is that going to affect the design of the building?
Right. So even if the codes aren't changing in terms of accessibility, other requirements about the building may be changing, and then those things need to be accessible. And so accessibility is evolving no matter what.
Yep.
That's interesting. And it kind of touches getting into the EV chargers actually tickles my interest about about getting into some of the weeds a little bit with you folks. So kind of switching over into some of the field stories, I'm sure that learning from the mistakes of the past you all talked about is something that's really critical, and growing and picking up things over time. What are some of your most memorable stories from the field? Does anyone want to share any specifics? Anonymized as needed.
I have 2 stories. Okay, so I'll start. I have 2 stories. So we were on our second progress inspection, and we were expecting to see, because in design there was a 24-inch wall-hung water closet that was supposed to be installed in this restroom. And when we got on site, we saw a 27-inch floor-mounted water closet. And just with a 3-inch difference in depth, the switch in specification caused it so that we no longer met certain clearances, such as the door maneuvering clearance. And we had to go back to the design team. We had to figure out how to reduce the depth of the lavatory counter so that we could provide a latch side maneuvering clearance. So within the technical standards, there are different options to provide accessibility. But that site inspection taught me that when there's a change in specification, 1, you have to make sure it doesn't impact other clearances, and 2, a good contractor would know to submit an RFI to make sure that they're all good if they had to change it, and confirm that with the architect as well as with us, the accessibility consultants. And then the second story I have is, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were working on a maternity project in a hospital, and this contractor didn't know anything about accessibility, so we're sharing the different things that they have to look out for to make sure that it's built correctly. And we had all the issues. We had slope issues, we had accessory mounting issues, and he hated seeing me on site. And with understanding, because sometimes we would have to cause a headache. But I met him again earlier this year on another project, and this time around he was showing me all the things that concerned him. And he was actually pointing out things that we would normally point out. And so that was really awesome to see that, from one project to another, this contractor learned. And he also pulled out like the reference notes that we would share with the contractors. So they knew exactly what we were talking about. Because some of these concepts are, just going over their head because they're thinking about other things. So by us providing resources to them, they're able to translate it to other projects.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it sounds like since you've been in the industry so long, and since you start to see the same design teams, the same construction teams over and over again, and we can all progress towards building better buildings over time because we all now understand each other's specialties. We understand the complications in terms of maybe schedule for their side of things, and we can share our expertise as far as accessibility. That's fantastic. Carlos.
Mine is not as technical. It was actually one of Jeff's projects primarily. You asked me to stop there. Do you mind stopping? He says to me, and I quote, "Do you mind stopping to take a look at a balcony condition?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that." This was way at the beginning of construction. And I pull into the parking lot, and there's 40 people waiting for me at the parking lot. 40, including the building, the company owner, this is a big, huge company, a very large company.
I didn't know this was going to happen.
Well, and I pull in and I'm like, oh my God. And I was, maybe 3 years in at that point. I
remember the project, what you're talking about. Now I know what you're talking
I'm like
about.
sitting there having like a mini panic attack. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I like kind of took a deep breath. And I came out, and I shake 40 people's hands, and they brought me to this, this balcony, this spec balcony there, and I'm sitting there, like, took a deep breath, and all of a sudden, I'm just like, I started spewing all this information that I knew I didn't have in me. Like, I thought it was not there, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I know so much. Like, this is like, it was a very weird moment, but this was one where like I solved the problem for them. Again, it was with the balcony, and I said, well, why don't you do XYZ? I think it was not to get too technical, but essentially you can have a 4-inch step down if a balcony is impervious. If it's pervious, it has to be half an inch. So we kind of fixed it for them, and this is the company owner, looks at his engineers, and he said, Carlos just came in here 5 minutes and he solved our problem. We spent 3 days talking about the same problem. So it was like, to that end, what did it teach me? It taught me that, the knowledge is inside. I mean, it was there. And ever since then, it gave me, I guess, the confidence, if you will.
Oh, wow. That really ties us back to the wisdom comment that you were making.
It was like, do you ever hear the saying? Sorry, I'm gonna off base. The saying, what does it say? Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. You ever heard that? It's so good.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's so good. It's so good.
Ian's gotta find a song.
Yes, Ian, you can cut that out, but it's so good. I love that.
The wisdom is in you.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
And I think there's a common thread here of you really never know what you're going to get yourself into on site. So there's a little bit of improv acting that we have to do in any construction site. And maybe you would call it creativity rather than improv. But I think being able to think on your feet, being able to understand the situation, understand all the different parameters, but then being able to communicate effectively across teams, see what the issue really is, and see if you can start solutioning right away.
I think that's what helps, having a diverse amount of knowledge that we have and being able to be flexible in what's going on. A lot of times we'll go out to a site. I really thought Carlos was only going to look at a balcony. But there may be something. Can you look at this? Can you look at this? Can you look at this?
Yeah.
And yeah, all right, we can do that. And, willing to stick your neck out, spend a little more time to give them some more information. People appreciate that. If you give them time, they like that. And I think that's what we try to do. And everyone gets sort of thrown in the deep end of the pool every now and then. But not intentionally. But
he knew you had the wisdom in you.
I see where you're going there.
But it happens.
You did it for your own good.
Yeah. No, but I mean,
he believed in you.
It's something like when we want everyone on our team to be the best consultant that we can. So we're going to give them opportunities to be autonomous, and basically, you're going to learn this one way or another.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just a matter of when's that time going to be when it's all going to click. And I think even part of seeing how people have grown in our company, in our team, you know, like I said before, we were at 4 or 5, excuse me. Now we're up to 23. It's pretty awesome. And seeing how, you know, we've started to divert ourselves into different aspects of construction, of aspects of design, aspects of accessibility even, and how our services have become more refined, have become more consistent. I take a look at the reports I'd say wrote 15 years ago, they were not as good as what we do now. And I think that that's a testament to continuing to push for quality and then not resting on our laurels and saying, this is what we want to do and do it well.
Yeah, one thing that I always think about and what keeps me here too is the way that we're always thinking about continuously learning, continuously improving. And that's both learning from ourselves, that's growing other team members, also evolving how we write reports, how we work with contractors. And the industry is evolving too, and that's fun to watch as well.
And if we can stay ahead of that,
Right.
it certainly helps. So, well, no one else is doing this. I'm glad that we're doing it. So that's, you know, and I think that some of the most useful conversations we have are the ones where you really can connect with somebody and give them information that they really would never have heard from someone else, providing a solution that no one else would have told them, and just being honest with them.
So we talked a lot about looking backwards today, but let's look a little bit towards the future. When we have you all on the podcast in 5 years, what do you think we'll be talking about then?
I think more 5 years, I think we'll be going more internationally.
Woo!
I think.
Oh, wow.
I should say, I hope. You know, I did notice, I just came back from Spain, and I got into an amazing conversation over there with somebody about, you know, what I did and what I do here. And they were very kind of knowledgeable of everything that we do. But they said that what they're trying to do now is they're trying to get these very old cities into compliance in a good way. There's no laws involved. There's nothing else. It's a matter of they want to make sure that the cities are maneuverable for people with disabilities. And they said, you know, we're always in look for experts and things like that. I'm like, maybe we can start off
Expand the
something here.
market.
Start SWA Spain, Jeff. You know.
You'll probably go there first.
But yeah, that's I honestly see a little bit more of a global aspect of what we do. I think that's coming. It's very different, very, very different. I think they're actually going to be beyond us in terms of accessibility at some point soon. So it's I think that's going to be fun to try and incorporate what we have and incorporate what they have and bring it together.
And that's interesting, even if we don't open our Spain office in 5 years. I think that
Kelly, no, we are.
It is happening.
Be positive.
It'll be
Let's put
eaten
that
by
by
the
the
board.
Come on. Although it could be fun, but I think the industry is, in general, the real estate industry, and I see this in policy. Policymakers are really trying to talk to different states, different cities, different countries even, and pull information from across the globe. And I think that is really going to empower us to have even more solutions in our pocket, have more available tools in our tool belt. Because people are learning from, even older buildings than we have here in New York and even older cities, and how if they can make those compliant or if they can make those accessible, then we can certainly do things here in New York.
For me, I think that one of the biggest things is going to be about the knowledge about what we do. A lot of the contractors we deal with now had never heard of accessibility. It wasn't something that was required. 5 years, it's going to continue to grow, I believe, in the knowledge base among the people who are in the workforce. That'll start to become very commonplace. Couple that with the mindset of having equity amongst all people in our country. Even not even in our country. Even in the Sesame Street in Germany has someone in a wheelchair. So I'm like, I don't know if they have in the United States. I haven't seen that one, but those kinds of things where we see how persons who have mobility impairments or hearing and visual impairments, it happens. And I think that we want to make sure how we can make it easier for everybody. And the more knowledge that we get to the general public, it starts to become not necessarily like, oh, we have to do this. But like I was saying before, how I look at it, it's just a different discipline that we have to meet in thinking about it in a very proactive way. So we're ahead of the curve in that we already have the knowledge base and knowing how to do it.
I'm excited for the changes in policy because, like you said, Kelly, it's learning from different cities globally. And in my time in Singapore, even though their standards are very similar to the ADA standards, they have other aspects that we're not considering in design, such as contrast and colors and visual distinctions. And, globally, populations are aging. And it's not even just about people with disabilities, it's elderly folk and just limited mobility. And I think it's going to be very exciting to see what happens in 5 years. And right now we're already seeing increasing guidance on things like EV chargers, kiosks. We're seeing more and more technology embedded in society. So how do we make sure that's accessible? And that's more and more integrated in the facilities that we see, such as hospitals and check-in lobbies for hotels.
That's fantastic. I feel like we have a really awesome 5 years ahead of us.
That's right.
In Spain.
And Spain. Well, it was awesome to have you on the podcast today, and it was really fantastic to hear all of your stories about how you ended up here. I'm so glad to be working beside you guys every day.
Thanks.
We're glad to be working with
you.
each other.
Yeah.
It's easy to work at a place like this when we know that everyone's here we're gonna change the world in a positive way, and I think that's it's empowering.
One facility at a time.
Yep.
Yes.
Cue the music.
You're outside of the donut.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Thank you for listening to Buildings and Beyond. The podcast is produced by Stephen Winter Associates. We make buildings perform better for all of the people who work, live, and play in them, and better for future generations. We are so grateful for our guests today for sharing their passion with us. And a big shout out to Roisin Cooper, our Director of HR, who has been supporting the growth of this amazing team over the past decade. Thank you also to our podcast team, Ian Slackus, Dylan Martello, Trisha Carr, and Heather Breslin. And if you were intrigued by these stories today and you're interested in a career at SWA, please check out our website, swinter.com/careers. Thanks, and we look forward to hearing you next time.